When you picture the technology that won World War II, what comes to mind? You're probably thinking of Sherman tanks, maybe the P-51 Mustang, or even the atomic bomb. But what if I told you that one of the most critical pieces of tech wasn't a weapon at all? It was something that, honestly, seems kind of boring at first glance, but its impact was so huge that a U.S. Army report called it the single most useful piece of communications gear in the entire war. This is the incredible story of the SCR-300, the walkie-talkie that really did help win the war.
So let me ask you a question. What did winning World War II actually sound like on the ground, in the middle of the fight? Was it the roar of a tank engine? The boom of artillery?
No, the real sound of victory was something much, much quieter and way more revolutionary. It was the sound of a clear, static-free voice cutting right through the absolute chaos of a battlefield. It was perfect communication, and that one simple thing gave the Allies an edge that their enemies just could not compete with.
To really get why this was such a big deal, we have to rewind to 1940. The world is on fire, and the U.S. Army is desperately trying to catch up. But on the battlefield, communication is a total disaster. I mean, the radios they have are so awful, so full of static, that most officers had just given up on them. They were sending soldiers, actual human beings, to run messages by hand through live fire situations. In the age of fast-moving tanks and planes, that's not just outdated, it's a death sentence.
The gap between what the Army had and what it desperately needed was just staggering. Look at their best portable radio at the time, the SCR-536, nicknamed the Handy-Talkie. Now, it was a cool idea, but it was an AM radio. That means any nearby engine, any thunderstorm, heck, even a faulty spark plug could fill it with static. And its absolute best range, on a good day, about 1 mile. That's useless for coordinating an attack. The Army needed something clear, something tough, with at least a 3 to 5 mile range. With the AM technology they were using, they were basically asking for magic.
So into this complete mess steps an engineer named Daniel Noble. In 1940, he takes over as the director of research for a company called Galvin Manufacturing. You probably know them better as Motorola. And Noble isn't just some guy in a lab coat. He just finished building the very first statewide two-way FM radio network for the Connecticut State Police. He had seen the future of radio, and he knew, without a doubt, it wasn't AM.
So why was FM such a game changer? Well, think of it this way. AM radio is like trying to have a conversation next to a running lawnmower. All the noise just drowns it out. FM technology is naturally immune to that kind of static. It delivers a crystal clear voice. But back then, the military thought FM was just too weird, too complicated, and totally unproven for combat. Sticking with AM was the safe bet. But Daniel Noble understood something crucial. In a war, playing it safe is how you lose.
And this is the moment where everything changes. Noble goes to Washington. He sits down with Major James O'Connell of the Signal Corps, and when he finds out they're about to order a new AM radio, he doesn't pull any punches. He looks the major right in the eye and tells him the Army is making a grave mistake. Can you just imagine the nerve? A civilian engineer telling the U.S. military that their entire plan is flat out wrong. But Noble's conviction was so absolute, he actually convinced O'Connell to take a huge risk. The Army agreed to fund his crazy idea, an experimental, portable FM radio. The SCR-300 was born.
So Noble gets the green light and rushes back to Chicago. He puts together a dream team of engineers, but the job in front of them was, well, monumental. The Army's wish list wasn't just tough. It was a bunch of contradictory demands that seemed literally impossible to achieve in one single device.
Just listen to this laundry list. It had to be under 35 pounds so one soldier could carry it. It needed a 3-mile range, had to run on batteries, and oh yeah, be completely waterproof. But here's the real kicker, the part that had other engineers shaking their heads. It needed to have 41 different channels, but because of wartime shortages, it could only use 2 tiny quartz crystals to control the frequency. That's like being asked to build a car that can fly, but only giving you bicycle parts. It sounded like pure science fiction.
Noble knew just how high the stakes were. He pulled his lead engineers aside, guys named Henry Magneski and Andy Afrinati. He told them that the Signal Corps had placed a life-and-death priority on this project. This wasn't about landing a contract anymore. He was making it crystal clear. If they failed, American soldiers would die. The weight of the entire infantry was now on their shoulders. And they delivered. Working around the clock, Noble's team pulled off one breakthrough after another. They invented a single control knob that tuned everything, so a scared soldier could use it in the dark without thinking. They built an automatic frequency control so it wouldn't drift off channel in the middle of a firefight, and then there was the squelch circuit. Oh man, this was genius. It got rid of that constant annoying shh hiss of an open radio channel. That meant operators weren't exhausted by the noise, and a real voice breaking the silence would immediately grab their attention. It was brilliant, human-centered design.
So by the spring of 1942, after a solid year of grinding work, they had 2 prototypes ready to go. It was time for the moment of truth. The whole team packed up and headed down to Fort Knox, Kentucky, to see if this impossible radio actually worked.
The result wasn't just good, it was unbelievable. Henry Magniski took one prototype, another engineer took the second one, and they separated by 8 miles. 8! Remember, the Army's impossible demand was just 3 miles. Magniski keyed the microphone, and his voice came through the speaker with perfect, static-free clarity. They hadn't just met the spec, they had almost tripled it. Daniel Noble's wild gamble on FM was a home run. The Army was absolutely blown away and ordered it into production immediately.
So the SCR-300 was rushed into combat, where it was truly put to the test. In the thick jungles of the Pacific, it immediately won over doubtful officers. During the invasion of Italy, it let forward observers call in surgically precise artillery strikes. On D-Day, its FM signals sliced right through the electromagnetic chaos on the beaches, a level of interference that would have made AM radios useless paperweights. And in the brutal freezing cold of the Battle of the Bulge, for surrounded American units, this radio was their only connection to the outside world. It was their lifeline.
The reports from the front were just glowing. Sure, the soldiers griped about how heavy the backpack was, but they didn't really care. After years of fighting deaf and blind, this radio felt like a miracle. As one young lieutenant in the Pacific wrote, it was an infantryman's dream.
But the ultimate praise, the final stamp of approval, came after the Battle of the Bulge. The Army's own official assessment concluded the SCR-300 was, and I quote, the single most useful piece of communications equipment employed in the battle. Think about that. Not just useful, the most useful. More than a tank, more than a plane. From a controversial idea in an engineer's head to the MVP of America's biggest battle of the war, the journey was complete.
But the story doesn't end in 1945. The shockwaves from Daniel Noble's radical bet on FM technology are still being felt today. To really grasp the advantage this gave the Allies, you have to look at what the other side was working with. The Germans were still stuck on static-filled AM radios, and the Japanese, some of their main radios needed 2 soldiers to operate, one to talk, and another poor guy whose only job was to sit there and crank a generator by hand just to power it. Meanwhile, a single American soldier with an SCR-300 had a massive tactical advantage. This wasn't a small step up, it was a generational leap.
And the scale of this thing was just massive. Motorola and other companies pumped out nearly 50,000 of these complex radios during the war. It was an absolute triumph of American industry and know-how, getting this game-changing tech into the hands of the soldiers who needed it most.
So the legacy here is huge. The SCR-300 proved that FM was the future of military radio, period. The British were so impressed they basically copied the design. And the iconic radios American GIs carried through the jungles of Vietnam, they were the direct descendants of the SCR-300. But maybe the most important legacy is the story itself. It's a perfect lesson in what can happen when one person has the technical courage to challenge the status quo and say, there's a better way. In the end, the story of the SCR-300 is really about the power of a better idea, driven by someone with real conviction. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the conventional wisdom we all accept today that's just waiting for a modern Daniel Noble to call it a grave mistake? What seemingly impossible idea is out there right now, just one person's courage away from changing the world all over again?